Independent investigation into the alleged payment of Home Office funding to the Paedophile Information Exchange. Final report. Final report. Page 2. Contents page. Summary. 3. Introduction. 4. Findings. 4. Voluntary Services, Unit Visa. 4. Paedophile Information Exchange. P.I.E. 4. Albany Trust. 5. Release/Princedale Trust. 6. Accounts of Visa personnel. 6. Visa grants. 7. Grants to Albany Trust. 8. Grants to Princedale Trust. 8. File retention and destruction policies. 9. Conclusion. 10. Annexes. Annex A. Terms of reference. 11. Annex B. The Spager Report. 12. Annex C. Details of Voluntary Services Unit Grants 1974-1984. 13. Final report. Page 3. 1. Summary. 1. 1. In December 2013, allegations appeared in the media that the Voluntary Services Unit Visa within the Home Office had provided funds to an organization called the Paedophile Information Exchange (P.I.E.) sometime during the 1970s. It was reported that a retired employee of Visa had raised concerns with senior management in the Home Office at the time. 1. In response, the Permanent Secretary at the Home Office commissioned an independent investigation, to be led by a senior investigator from another central government department. 1. 2. The investigation focused on the period 1973 to 1985, starting with the year Visa began to the year after P.I.E. disbanded. The investigation included an extensive review of both archived records and open-source information, as well as reviewing and hearing evidence from former Home Office staff, including the individual who originally made the allegations. 1. 3. No evidence was found to support the allegation that Visa provided direct funding to P.I.E. Evidence of connections between P.I.E. and a number of other organizations were established, and 2 of these organizations, Albany Trust and Princedale Trust, received grant funding from VSU. However, no evidence was found to indicate that either organization used this funding to support P.I.E. 1. http://www. Daily Mail. Co. UK/news/article 2,520,083/pro claims government gave money child sex ring -70s. HTML. Final report. Page 4. 2. Introduction to. 1. The investigation began on 8 January 2014 and was completed on 13 March 2014. The terms of reference are attached at Annex A. 2. 2. 303 files relating to VSU between the years 1973 and 1985 were identified in the archives of the Home Office or other government departments. 138 files were considered to be of potential relevance to the investigation. 126 files were available and reviewed. The remaining 12 files were recorded as destroyed or presumed destroyed, in line with relevant file retention and destruction policies in place at the time. In addition, 14 personnel files relating to the period were retrieved and reviewed. 2. 3. A detailed and extensive review of relevant open-source information was also undertaken to identify records relating to VSU, P.I.E. and relevant third-party organizations. In total, over 35,000 documents were reviewed during the course of the investigation. The bank with which P.I.E. held an account was also contacted to identify the availability of historical records. 2. 4. The senior investigator also saw a written account of the allegations made by the former employee and also heard accounts from other former Home Office staff who held key positions in relation to VSU during the late 1970s. 3. Findings. Voluntary Services Unit Visa. 3. 1. Visa was established in 1973 within the Civil Service Department when the Lord Privy Seal Lord Windlesham took responsibility for coordinating the government's efforts to support and encourage voluntary work. In 1974, Visa transferred to the Home Office. 3. 2. Visa was responsible for providing funding to voluntary organizations/projects that were not the direct responsibility of any single government department, or when responsibilities spanned the interests of more than one department. Visa also provided advice to government departments on the impact of departmental policies on the voluntary sector. 3. In the first full financial year 1974-75, Visa paid a total of £833 in grants. In 1983-84, total expenditure was in excess of £13 m. Financial information for the year 1984-85 could not be located. 3. 4. Visa ceased to exist in 1997, when the Community Relations Unit was created and took over responsibility of Home Office interests in the voluntary sector. Paedophile Information Exchange P.I.E. 3. 5. P.I.E. was set up in 1974 by Michael Hansen and Ian Campbell Dunn in Scotland. In 1975 it relocated to London. Final report, page 5-3. 6. P.I.E.'s stated objectives included campaigning for changes in the law so as to permit sexual activities between adults and children, counseling those of pedophile orientation, and putting them in touch with one another, and providing assistance to those facing criminal charges for sexual acts with children. 3. 7. The organization appears to have been, at least in part, funded from the sale of and subscription to various publications, including Contact Understanding Paedophilia and Magpie. In 1978, P.I.E. published Paedophilia: Some Questions and Answers and sent copies to all members of Parliament and the media. 3. 8. In the early 1980s, a number of senior P.I.E. members were charged with criminal offenses relating to child pornography, and resulted in several convictions. It is reported that P.I.E. disbanded in 1984. Albany Trust, Release and Princedale Trust. Albany Trust. 3. 9. The Albany Trust was founded as a charitable organization in 1958 to provide expert professional support to sexual minorities. The trust had connections with the Homosexual Law Reform Society (HLRS), which was formed to campaign for the adoption of the recommendations of the 1957 Wolfenden Report. 2. 3. 10. Visa provided grants to the Albany Trust between 1974 and 1979. See paragraph 5. 4. Other funding to Albany Trust included covenants, legacies and donations from other organizations and government departments. 3. 11. The investigation established links between Albany Trust and P.I.E. In December 1975, Albany Trust invited representatives from P.I.E., HAL 3, counselors and medical professionals to a series of meetings. The meetings covered the need for a supportive group for pedophiles and the proposed production of an information pamphlet about pedophilia, intended to inform professional people, parents, and the general public. 3. 12. Evidence indicates that Albany Trust initially supported the production of the pamphlet, but withdrew this support in 1977 following accusations by Mary to the 1957 Wolfenden Report recommended that homosexual behavior between consenting adults in private should no longer be a criminal offense. This was not taken forward until the Sexual Offences Act in 1967, which decriminalized homosexual acts meeting set criteria. 3. Paedophile Action for Liberation (PAL) was established as a breakaway group of the South London Gay Liberation Front in 1974 and subsequently merged with P.I.E. in 1977. Final report, page 6. White House 4. That Albany Trust was using public funding to support pedophile groups. 3. 13. Mary Whitehouse also alleged that Albany Trust had funded the translation of a report commissioned by the Dutch Ministry of Justice, the Spager Report. She argued that the report sought to justify the gratification of adult lust for children. See Annex B. 3. 14. In 1977, a meeting was held between Visa and Albany Trust where it was reported that there was some Home Office disquiet about the way Albany Trust assists sexual minorities. This was followed shortly after by a parliamentary question by Sir Bernard Brain, MP, and related correspondence, alleging that the Albany Trust had supplied copies of the translated Spager Report to P.I.E., who then allegedly sold copies for £1 each. Albany Trust refuted they had produced copies for mass distribution or that copies had been produced at public expense. Release/Princedale Trust. 3. 15. Release was founded in London in 1967 by Carolyn Coon and Rufus Harris in response to the growing number of people arrested under the Dangerous Drugs Act 1965, who required legal advice and welfare services. At the time, release was located at 50 Princedale Road, Holland Park, London. 3. 16. Release provided a 24-hour telephone support service, legal representation and advice on a variety of issues including drugs, medical and housing problems. Release was granted charitable status in 1972. 3. 17. In 1975, Release moved to 1 Elgin Avenue, London. In the same year, P.I.E adopted the same address for its correspondence. 3. 18. The welfare and advisory services of Release were supported by another charity, Princedale Trust, of which Rufus Harris was a trustee. Hansard records show that when Release received funding from VSU during the 1970s, grants were made via the Princedale Trust. 5. See paragraph 5. 5. 4. Accounts of Visa personnel. 4. 1. The former employee who originally made the allegations that Visa had provided funding to P.I.E submitted a written statement to the investigation. In the statements, the individual stated a hazy recollection of seeing a document in approximately 1980, which they believe was a schedule of grants for renewal, and that on that document was an entry for P.I.E. They could not be definitive about the grant amount, but had a vague recollection that it might have been £30,000 and that it would have been a renewal, indicating that the original. 4. Mary Whitehouse was a prominent campaigner for improved morals in society throughout the 1970s and 1980s. 5. Hansard March 1977 Final report page 7 Award would have been made in 1976-77. The individual also stated that they approached Visa's head of unit at the time to raise their concerns about the alleged funding and that these were dismissed. The individual further asserted that the grant would have been approved at ministerial level, as the head of unit would not have had delegated authority to do so. 4. 2. Visa's head of unit in post at the time left the Home Office in 1983. The senior investigator heard information from former employees that vouched for the individual's integrity, and presented a view that they would not have knowingly supported or facilitated the alleged funding to P.I.E. 4. 3. The senior investigator also heard accounts from former Home Office employees with key knowledge of Visa during the time of the alleged funding. No individual recalled any knowledge of any proposed or actual grant funding to P.I.E. One account, which placed Visa's work in the late 1970s into context, outlined that Visa provided the first government funding for victim support and to assist Black communities. The view shared was that in light of the attention these projects drew at the time, any proposal to fund P.I.E would almost certainly have been remembered. 5. Visa grants. 5. 1. In its first full financial year 1974-75, Visa had an initial budget of approximately £1.9 meters and paid a total of £833 in grants. In 1983-84, the total Visa spend was in excess of £13 This included over £4 to the Women's Royal Voluntary Services WRVS, the largest single beneficiary. A summary of grant payments together with relevant Hansard records of those payments made by Visa between 1974 and 1984 can be found in Table 1. A full record of grants awarded is embedded at Annex C. Table 1 Record of Visa grant expenditure year total grants paid *1973-74 1974-75 £833,445 1975-76 £1,380,169 1976-77 1977-78 £2,155,023 1978-79 £2,637,430 1979 to £82,435,486 1980-81 £5,174,833 1981 to £82. £7,209,901 1982 to £83 £15,580,091 1983 to £84 £16,708,105 1984 to £85 According to Hansard, no Hansard record available. Final report page 85. 2. The investigation identified that P.I.E held a bank account with the Midland Bank, now HSBC, but media reports indicated that the bank ended the relationship in 1983 due to public reaction to P.I.E's activities. 6 checks with HSBC confirmed that no financial banking records remained due to the passage of time. 5. 3. When Visa initially formed, all grants of £25,000 or above were approved by the Treasury. Following the transfer to the Home Office, former employees have confirmed that the authorization process required ministerial approval for all grant applications. In practice, it is understood that the relevant minister may have provided a level of delegated authority for the approval of grants below a certain level. It has not been possible to ascertain the exact amount, but has been suggested that this might have been around £25,000 in the late 1970s. Grants to Albany Trust 5. 4. Table 2 summarizes Visa grants paid to Albany Trust between 1974 and 1979, when all government funding to Albany Trust ceased. Table 2 Visa grants to Albany Trust year: grant paid 1974 to 75 £10,000, 1975 to 76 £10,000, 1976 to 77 £13,500, £5,717 debt. Of Education and Science 1977 to 78 £13,500, £2,174 debt. Of Education and Science 1978 to 79 £15,000, 1979 to 83,750 ***, interim payment from DHSS pending full funding decision. Source: Hansard and Visa Historical Records. Grants to Princedale Trust 5. Visa paid a number of grants to Princedale Trust between 1974 and 1984 to support the charitable and welfare roles that Princedale Trust had with release. 7 Ampere's summary of Visa grants paid to Princedale Trust are summarized in Table 3. Funding was specifically not provided for the more contentious issues that release was involved with, for example their campaign for the decriminalization of the possession of drugs for personal use. 6 Daily Mail 5 September 1983 7 Hansard March 1975 Hansard March 1977 Final report page 9 Table 3 Visa grants to Princedale Trust year: grant paid 1974 to 75 £10,000, 1975 to 76 £20,000, 1976 to 77 £20,000, 1977 to 78 £33,000, 1978 to 79 £42,000, 1979 to 80 £37,500, 1980 to 81 £55,000, estimated 1981 to 80 to £60,000, 1982 to 83 £65,000, 1983 to 84 £68,000. Source: Hansard and Visa Historical Records 6. File Retention and Destruction Policies 6. 1. The Public Records Act Pro was passed in 1838 to keep safely the public records. In 1952-54 the Grieg Committee reviewed the original act, and this led to the Pro 1958, which legislated that government records should be held in the Public Records Office Pro National Archives since 2003, by the time they are 30 years old, and made available to the public after 50 years. Subsequent minor changes in 1967 reduced that period to 30 years. 8.6. 2. Grieg also recommended that departmental records should pass through a system of first 5-year and second 25 years reviews, determining which should be destroyed immediately or preserved until second review, with either immediate destruction or further review for the department's own purposes, and subsequently which should be preserved permanently on grounds of departmental need and historical significance. 6. 3. There does not appear to have been any specific retention and disposal policies in the Home Office prior to 1982, when the Grieg system was adopted, as an initial step towards adopting a uniform records administration policy. 6. 4. Records show that in the mid-1980s on average, 30% of files were destroyed immediately, 60% were given a future destruction date, and 20% were retained for second review, with 90% of these ultimately being destroyed. 6. 5. It is assumed that all files reported as destroyed or presumed destroyed have been disposed of correctly and in accordance with Home Office policies and due to the subsequent passage of time. 8 http://www National Archives. Gov. UK/information management/legislation/history of PRO. HTM Final Report page 10.7. Conclusion 7. 1. The conclusion of this investigation follows a detailed assessment of the information and evidence available between 1973 and 1985, together with an assessment of accounts provided by both the individual who originally made the allegations and other senior visa staff from the time. 7. 2. The allegation that Visa provided funding to P.I.E. is reported to have occurred approximately 35 years ago. The historic nature of the allegations presented its own challenges in reaching a definitive conclusion. Archived records provided a good historical context, but did not provide a detailed record of all Visa activity from the time nor provide full financial records. 7. 3. The allegations were made by one individual. As a former employee, the individual's account is credible, however no information or other person has corroborated their account. 7. 4. The former employee reported that they had raised concerns about the alleged funding with the Visa head of unit at the time. There is no evidence or record of any Visa members of staff raising concerns regarding alleged funding to P.I.E. Allegations first surfaced in December 2013 via the media. 7. 5. It is the reasonable conclusion of the senior investigator, taking all facts into account including information both seen and heard, that on the balance of probabilities and in the absence of supporting evidence or a corroborative account, the alleged funding from VSU to P.I.E. did not take place. 7. 6. There is clear evidence that Visa provided funding to organizations who were connected to P.I.E., namely Albany Trust and Princedale Trust. It is impossible to determine whether Visa funding provided to either of these organizations was indirectly used to support the work of P.I.E., but no evidence was found to conclude that it did. Final Report page 11 Annex A Terms of Reference to review all Home Office Voluntary Services Unit Visa files, records and other papers from the period 1973 to 1985 and establish a picture of 1. What, if any, funding was provided by the department to the organization known as the Paedophile Information Exchange or P.I.E. and 2. What, if any, action was taken in relation to specific concerns from any member of staff in the Visa concerning any alleged funding to the Paedophile Information Exchange or P.I.E., in particular the review should establish a full picture in respect of any correspondence, reports or papers relating to Home Office funding of the Paedophile Information Exchange or P.I.E. where materials or papers or reports cannot be located or accounted for. The review should establish why they cannot be located and, if destroyed, whether this was within the government guidance on retention and disposal of files and papers at that time. If during the course of the review the investigator identifies individuals or other leads directly relevant to the review, they can pursue those matters, subject to relevant consents being obtained. The review should report to the Permanent Secretary within 2 months of the start of the review. A report suitable for publication should be provided together with any relevant recommendations or findings. Final Report page 12 Annex B The Spager Report. The Spager Report was commissioned by the Dutch Ministry of Justice to consider the question of a reduction and alignment of the age of consent for homosexuals and heterosexuals from 21 to 16 years of age. The report fully endorsed the proposal. Anthony Gray, director of Albany Trust, arranged for the translation of the report into English in 1970, authorizing final costs of £71.50. Correspondence was on Albany Trust stationery, and in a letter to the translator he states, "As we are a charitable organization with a very limited budget." It was subsequently alleged that P.I.E. obtained a copy of the English translation some years later and sold it for £1 per copy. In 1976, Mary Whitehouse spoke out about Albany Trust's involvement and their alleged support for paedophilia and P.I.E., leading to a long-running argument between herself and the trust. She reportedly argued that the report promoted the abolition of the age of consent and encouraged adult sexual relations with children, although the Spager report did not draw these conclusions. In 1977, Sir Bernard Brain MP entered into the debate. He tabled a parliamentary question for the Secretary of State for the Home Department questioning government funding to Albany and Princedale trusts and claimed to have evidence that they both have given encouragement and publicity to P.I.E. 9. Sir Bernard Brain MP also entered into communications with Anthony Gray on the subject, and in one letter Anthony Gray stated that the translation was on the initiative of the Sexual Law Reform Society at no cost to the Albany Trust. In 1981, Anthony Gray wrote a paper, How Moral is the Backlash, or the Politics of Puritanism. In this he quotes from Tom O'Carroll's book Paedophilia, the radical case, which had been published in 1980. Tom O'Carroll had stated in connection with Mary Whitehouse's comments, "We didn't receive a penny from the Trust." 9 Hansard, December 1977 Final report. Page 13 Annex C. Details of Voluntary Services Unit grants 1974 to 1984. Source Hansard Records. No record of expenditure for the year 1976-77. Grant applications, agreed by the Voluntary Services Unit. Organization 1974-75 £1,975 Action Resource Center 9,000 6,000 After 6 Housing Advisory Trust 10,000 Albany Trust 10,000 Bays Adult Literacy Organizer 14,500 British Association of Settlements 12,59,250 British Council for Aid to Refugees 27,000 28,000 British Council of Churches 9,750 Brixton Neighbourhood Community Association 24,000 Central Council for the Disabled 8,000 Checks Rights Centre 2,400 Child Poverty Action Group 10,000 City Poverty Committee 2,500 Community Service Volunteers 22,000 96,250 Community Transport 4,000 17,500 Contact 1757,000 Cruise Clubs Limited 23,000 Fair Play for Children Campaign 10,500 17,550 Family First Trust 8,000 Gadam Centre 7,000 Gingerbread 13,500 Girls Alone in London Service 5,000 Handicapped Adventure Playground Association 22,000 Melting Pot Foundation 24,000 NACRO 22,500 34,750 National Association of Community Relations Councils 3,400 National Association of Indian Youth 10,000 National Association of Widows 3,500 National Council of Social Service / Metropolitan Counties 40,000 National Elfrida Rathbone Society 2,125 9,425 National Playing Fields Association 12,000 35,000 National Youth Bureau Voluntary Opportunities Digest 750 1650 Outset 4,000 6,000 Pre-Retirement Association 14,000 17,000 Princedale Trust 10,000 20,000 Romany Guild 10 20 1750 Runnymede Trust 3,500 Shack 7,000 3,000 Speak 1,000 The Cresset 40,000 30,000 Toynbee Hall 25,000 Ugandan Evacuees Resettlement Advisory Trust 500 Volunteer Centre 49,411 119,000 Wandsworth Council for Community Relations 1,000 4,000 Welsh Council of Social Service 13,656 26,344 West End Coordinated Voluntary Services 44,000 Westminster Pastoral Foundation 20,000 23,000 Final Report page 14 Young Volunteer Force Foundation 186,282 238,000 Young Volunteer Resource Module 12,500 19,850 Total committed on 5 November 1975 565,145 1,060,369 * Actual expenditure in 1974-75 Grant in aid applications settled by the Voluntary Services Unit Organisation 1974-75 £1,975 Board of Social Responsibility 4,000 British Association of Settlements 8,000 National Council of Social Service 251,800 312,425 Volunteer Bureau Development Officer Grant expires December 1975 4,500 3,375 Total 268,300 319,800 *C grants Final report page 15 Grant applications agreed by the Voluntary Services Unit 1977-78 Organisation 1977-78 Action Resource Centre 13,000 Advisory Committee for the Education of Romani and other Travelers 5,500 After 6 Housing Advisory Trust 14,000 Albany Trust 13,500 Aveka Service Agency for Church and Community Work 3,000 British Association of Settlements 19,300 British Council for Aid 2 Refugees 189,500 British Council of Churches 11,400 Brixton Neighbourhood Community Association 43,590 Child Poverty Action Group 13,500 Community Projects Foundation 371,000 Community Service Volunteers 297,211 Community Transport 27,500 Fair Play for Children 26,000 Family Day Centre Projects 1 Ada Tout de Trist 26,858 2. Cambridge House and Talbot 16,524 3. Camden Family Service Unit 6,254. Defoe Daycare Centre 24,505. Gingerbread Croydon 9,006. Institute of Community Studies 8,297 7. Liverpool Personal Service Society 5,188. London Voluntary Service Council 19,760 Family First Trust 5,000 Festival Welfare Services 2,770 Gamblers Anonymous 125 Gingerbread 30,000 Girls Alone in London 10,000 Govan Area Resource Centre 35,000 Greater Manchester Council for Voluntary Services Development Officer 7,000 Handicapped Adventure Playground Association 7,000 International Voluntary Service 16,033 London Voluntary Service Council Community Work Services 32,575 Melting Pot Foundation 16,000 Merseyside Council for Voluntary Service Development Officer 7,000 National Association for Asian Youth 19,000 National Association for the Care and Resettlement of Offenders Hammersmith Project 45,000 National Association of Community Relations Councils 10,500 National Association of Widows 4,700 National Association of Youth Clubs 39,000 National Council of Social Service Metropolitan Development Officers 32,750 National Elfrida Rathbone Society 10,000 National Playing Fields Association 48,750 National Youth Bureau National Association of Young People's Counseling and Advisory Service 3,500 Young Volunteer Resource Unit 48,200 Newham Community Renewal Program 24,700 North Kensington Amenity Trust 10,500 Northern Association for Community Care 500 Onward Industries 40,000 Outset 11,550 Final Report Page 16 Grant Applications agreed by the Voluntary Services Unit 1,977 278 Organisation 1977 278 £. Pre-Retirement Association 8,000 Princedale Trust for Release 33,000 Returned Volunteer Action 7,000 Romany Guild 2042 Runnymede Trust 14,000 Scoutreach 7,000 Shack 27,000 South Wales Anti-Poverty Action Committee 44,000 21 Swindon Viewpoint 1250 Task Force 32,475 Volunteer Centre 241,000 Wales Playing Fields Association 4,000 Wandsworth Council Tooting Youth Project 5,000 West End Coordinated Voluntary Services 47,712 Total £2,155,023 Final Report Page 17 Grant Applications agreed by the Voluntary Services Unit 1,978 279 Organisation 1978 279 £. Action Resource Centre 13,000 Advisory Council for the Education of Romani and Other Travellers 6,500 After 6 Housing Advisory Trust 3,000 Albany Trust 15,000 Avec 3,000 British Association for Counselling 6,000 British Association of Settlements 21,138 British Council for Aid to Refugees 342,918 British Council of Churches Community Work Resource Unit 12,700 Brixton Neighbourhood Community Association 43,605 Child Poverty Action Group 5,000 Community Projects Foundation 437,588 Community Service Volunteers 315,880 Community Transport 32,770 Design Resource Association 5,000 Family Day Centre Projects 1 Ada Tout de Trist 41,278 2. Cambridge House and Talbot 21,334 3. Camden Family Service Unit 12,472 4. Croydon Gingerbread 12,808 5. Defoe Day Centre 35,897 6. Liverpool Personal Service Society 10,697. London Voluntary Service Council 34,214 8. Institute of Community Studies 13,790. Fair Play for Children Campaign 27,000. Gamblers Anonymous 500. Gingerbread 14,000. Girls Alone in London Service Gals 12,000. Govan Resource Centre 40,968. Great George Project Liverpool 20,000. Greater Manchester Council for Voluntary Service 7,700. International Voluntary Service 26,000. International Year of the Child 30,500. London Voluntary Services Council Community Work Resource Unit 54,036. Melting Pot Foundation 22,616. Merseyside Council for Voluntary Service 7,700. National Association of Community Relations Councils 2,750. National Association for Asian Youth 27,949. National Association of Youth Clubs Multiracial Project 41,000. National Council of Social Service Community Development Officers 30,661. National Council of Social Service Festival Welfare Services 7,500. National Playing Fields Association 50,000. National Youth Bureau National Association of Young and People's Counseling and Advisory Services 10,841. Young Volunteers Resources Unit 54,500. Newham Community Renewal Program 26,700. Newham Homeless Young People's Project 16,750. Northern Association for Community Care 35,000. Onward Industries NACRO 44,000. Outset 15,550. Pre-Retirement Association 5,826. Final report page 18. Grant applications agreed by the Voluntary Services Unit 1,978 279. Organisation 1978 279 £. Princedale Trust Release 42,000. Returned Volunteer Action 4,750. Romany Guild 2,625. Royal Association for Disability and Rehabilitation 8,500. Runnymede Trust 13,000. Scoutreach Nottingham 7,000. South Wales Anti-Poverty Action Committee 55,320. Student Community Action Resources Project 14,898. Task Force 55,258. Volunteer Centre 265,600. Media Project Volunteer Centre 18,750. Wales Playing Fields Association 8,600. West End Coordinated Voluntary Services 63,500. Total 1978 279 £2,637,430. Final report page 19. Grant applications 1,979 280. Organisation 1979 280 £. Action Resource Centre 20,000. Avec * 3,000. British Association for Counselling 12,000. British Association of Settlements * 21,138. British Council for Aid to Refugees * 168,613. Brixton Neighbourhood Community Association * 43,605. Bulldog Manpower Services Ltd 265,000. Community Service Volunteers * 315,880. Community Transport 29,825. Design Resource Association 15,000. Family Day Centre Projects 1. Ada Tout de Tris 42,326 2. Cambridge House and Talbot 24,454 3. Camden Family Service Unit 14,084. Croydon Gingerbread 13,404 5. Defoe Day Centre 42,679 6. Liverpool Personal Service Society 14,187. London Voluntary Service Council 38,394 8. Institute of Community Studies 14,048. Fair Play for Children Campaign 29,100. Gamblers Anonymous 500. Girls Alone in London Service Gals 13,020. Govan Resource Centre * 40,968. Greater Manchester Council for Voluntary Service 7,700. International Voluntary Service * 26,000. International Year of the Child 27,175. Joint Working Group for Refugees from Latin America * 138,970. London Voluntary Services Council Community Work Resource Unit 57,840 Melting Pot Foundation * 22,616 Merseyside Council for Voluntary Service 7,700 National Association for Asian Youth * 27,949 National Council of Social Service Consolidated Grant 412,248 National Council of Social Service Community Development Officers * 30,661 National Council of Social Service Festival Welfare Service * 7,500 National Council of Social Service Management Training 4,000 National Playing Fields Association * 50,000 National Youth Bureau National Association of Young People's Counseling and Advisory Services * 10,841 Young Volunteer Resource Unit 61,823 Voluntary Service Opportunities Register 5,765 Newham Community Renewal Program 30,500 Newham Homeless Young People's Project * 16,750 Northern Association for Cooperative Community Care * 35,000 Onward Industries NAPRO * 44,000 Outset * 15,550 Police Complaints Board 457,000 Princedale Trust Release * 42,000 Royal Association for Disability and Rehabilitation 9,000 Runnymede Trust * 13,000 Save the Children Fund * NAE Scoutreach Nottingham 3,500 Final Report page 20 Grant Applications 1,979 280 Organisation 1979 280 £. South Wales Anti-Poverty Action Committee * 55,320 Student Community Action Resources Project * 14,898 Task Force 59,206 The Orkendon Venture * 35,167 Time for God 3,000 Volunteer Centre * 265,600 Media Project VC * 18,750 Wales Playing Fields Association * 8,600 West End Coordinated Voluntary Services 67,216 * Grant level not yet approved 1,978-79 Grant shown in brackets 20,000 Final Report page 21 Grant applications agreed by the Voluntary Services Unit 1,979 280 Organisation 1979 280 £. Action Resource Centre 20,000 Association of Researchers into Voluntary Action and Community Involvement AVAC 717 AVEC 3,958 British Association for Counselling 12,000 British Association of Settlements 24,000 British Council of Churches Community Work Resource Unit 6,042 Brixton Neighbourhood Community Association 43,552 Community Projects Foundation 478,089 Community Service Volunteers 327,000 Community Transport 29,825 Design Resource Association 15,000 Family Day Centre Projects Ada Tout de Tris 42,326 Cambridge House and Talbot 27,871 Camden Family Service Unit 14,230 Croydon Gingerbread 13,404 Defoe Day Centre 42,669 Liverpool Personal Service Society 14,180 London Voluntary Service Council 39,768 Institute of Community Studies 14,050 Fair Play for Children 29,100 Federation of Community Work Training Groups 1,000 Gamblers Anonymous 500 Gingerbread 4,900 Girls Alone in London Service Gals 13,020 Govan Resource Centre 46,834 Greater Manchester Council for Voluntary Service Development Officer 7,700 International Voluntary Service 19,784 International Year of the Child 32,000 London Voluntary Services Council Resource Centre 59,521 Melting Pot Foundation 26,000 Merseyside Council for Voluntary Service Development Officer 7,700 Midland Public Service Announcement Scheme 6,000 National Association for Asian Youth 28,400 National Association of Victims Support Schemes 5,000 National Council of Social Service Community Development Officers 38,847 Festival Welfare Service 10,506 Management Services 4,000 London Voluntary Service Council 2,192 Campaign Books 3,400 International Council of Social Welfare 2,500 National Playing Fields Association 50,000 National Youth Bureau National Association of Young People's Counseling and Advisory Services 12,678 Young Volunteer Resource Units 66,375 Voluntary Service Opportunities Register 5,765 Newham Community Renewal Program 31,500 Newham Homeless Young People's Project 15,000 North Kensington Amenity Trust 6,000 North Association for Community Care Bendry Lodge 29,000 Final Report page 22 Grant applications agreed by the Voluntary Services Unit 1,979 280 Organisation 1979 280 £. Onward Industries 50,600 Outset 12,150 Princedale Trust Release 37,500 Piccadilly Project 10,000 Royal Association for Disability and Rehabilitation 9,000 Runnymede Trust 8,750 Scout Reach Nottingham 3,500 South Wales Anti-Poverty Action Committee Resource Centre 68,750 Southampton Community Service Council Public Service Announcement Scheme 1,000 Stockport Council of Voluntary Service Volunteers Job Shop 1,500 Student Community Action Resources Programme 14,000 Task Force 59,206 Time for God 2,000 Volunteer Centre 317,513 Media Project Volunteer Centre 29,056 Wales Playing Fields Association 8,500 West End Coordinated Voluntary Services 68,558 £2,435,486 Note responsibility for the grant to the British Council for Aid to Refugees, which in 1978-79 received £342,918 from the Voluntary Services Unit, has now been transferred to another administrative division. Final report page 23 Grants administered by Visa 1982 1981 Organisation 1982 £81 Action Resource Centre 20,000 Alone in London Service 14,320 Association of Researchers into Voluntary Action and Community Involvement of Act 4,300 British Council of Churches Community Work Resource Unit 14,500 Brixton Neighbourhood Community Association 50,500 Charitable Trade Advisory Group 7,500 Community Transport 25,465 Fair Play for Children 31,000 Family Day Centre Projects 1 Ada Tout de Tris 55,463 2 Cambridge House and Talbot 27,792 3 Camden Family Service Unit 20,454 Croydon Gingerbread 14,804 5 Defoe Day Centre 50,684 6 Liverpool Personal Service Society 15,555 7 London Voluntary Service Council 49,835 8 Institute of Community Studies 18,237 Federation of Community Work Training Groups 15,023 Festival Welfare Services 12,350 Gamblers Anonymous 500 Greater Manchester Council for Voluntary Service Development Officer 10,000 International Voluntary Service 21,800 Melting Pot Foundation 10,000 Merseyside Council for Voluntary Service Development Officer 10,000 Midlands Public Announcement Scheme 10,500 National Association of Asian Youth 18,000 National Association of Victims Support Schemes 10,000 National Council for Voluntary Organizations, Development Officers 24,000 B Management Training Courses 4,000 National Playing Fields Association 56,000 Northern Association for Community Care 34,580 Reach 4,500 Runnymede Trust 3,750 Volunteer Centre Media Project 32,500 Wales Playing Fields Association 10,800 West End Coordinated Voluntary Service 74,520 Amount of grant not yet determined AVEC British Association for Counselling, British Association of Settlements, Community Projects Foundation, Community Service Volunteers Govan Area Resource Centre London Voluntary Service Council Community Work Resource Unit National Council for Voluntary Organisations Grant in Aid National Council for Voluntary Organizations International Council of Social Welfare National Youth Bureau Final Report page 24 National Association of Young People's Counseling and Advisory Service Young Volunteer Resource Unit Newham Community Renewal Programme Onward Industries NACRO Princedale Trust for Release South Wales Anti-Poverty Action Committee Student Community Action Resources Programme Task Force Time for God Volunteer Center Women's Royal Voluntary Service Grant in Aid grants administered by Probation and Aftercare Department. Amount of grant already determined £1982 £81 Anchor Club Leicester 4,850 Apex Trust 32,400 Birmingham Prisoners Visitors Centre 4,700 Bristol Prisoners Visitors Centre 1350 Brixton Prisoners Visitors Centre 2,500 Bulldog Manpower Services Ltd 340,000 Catholic Marriage Advisory Council Grant in Aid 74,500 Circle Trust 26,850 Dartmoor Accommodation Scheme 4,000 Family Welfare Association Grant in Aid 11,500 Hackrow Crisis and Support Centre 3,800 Institute of Marital Studies Grant in Aid 170,000 Jewish Marriage Education Council Grant in Aid 3,000 Leeds Prisoners Visitors Centre 850 Lifeline Day Centre 6,350 National Association for the Care and Resettlement of Offenders Grant in Aid 316,000 NACRO Educational Advisory Service 18,835 National Association of Voluntary Hostels Limited 27,500 National Marriage Guidance Council Grant in Aid 555,000 New Bridge 8,050 Newham Alternatives Project 6,070 N.E. London St. Leonard's Society 1200 Preston and District Lodging Scheme 1500 Prisoners' Wives and Families Society 1500 Prisoners' Wives Service 4000 St. Giles Day Centre 2500 Society of Voluntary Associates over 14,000 Stoneham Housing Association Limited 36,000 Yorker Crow Lodging Scheme 2,200 Amount of grant, not determined in respect of specific recipients £1. 637 million is allocated to the deficit funding of some 240 hostels administered by more than 200 voluntary bodies. A further £346,000 is allocated mainly on a once-for-all basis to assist special projects to be set up or maintained by some 40 voluntary organisations. Grants for refugees. Amount of grant already determined £1982 £81 Final report page 25 Grants for refugees. Amount of grant already determined £1982 £81 Joint Working Group for Refugees from Latin America 73,000 Amount of grant not yet determined British Council for Aid to Refugees or Kendon Venture Save the Children Fund grants or grants in aid to other bodies. Amount of grant already determined £1982 £81 International Social Service of Great Britain 157,000 Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents 6,600 United Kingdom Immigrants Advisory Service Grant in Aid 491,000 Final report page 26 Details of grants given by the Voluntary Service Unit to voluntary organisations in the United Kingdom during the financial year 1981-82, showing the amount of grant awarded to each organisation. Organisation 1981-82 £, Action Resource Centre 20,000 Association of Researchers in Voluntary Action and Community Involvement 7,450 AVEC 12,200 British Association for Counselling 10,000 British Association of Settlements and Social Action Centres 32,600 British Council of Churches Community Work Resource Unit 17,336 Brixton Neighbourhood Community Association 4,600 SETU 27,700 Charity Trading Advisory Group 8,000 Community Projects Foundation 695,000 Community Service Volunteers 473,200 Community Transport 27,400 Fair Play for Children 25,000 Federation of Community Work Training Groups 14,065 Festival Welfare Services 17,000 Gamblers Anonymous 375 Higher Education Foundation 1,500 Horticultural Therapy Land Use Volunteers 3,500 International Voluntary Service 21,800 London Voluntary Service Council 162 Merseyside Council for Voluntary Service 11,000 Midland Public Service Announcement Scheme 9,000 National Association for Asian Youth 10,330 National Association of Victims Support Schemes 15,100 National Association of Young People's Counselling and Advisory Service 22,500 National Council for Voluntary Organisations International Conference on Social Welfare 18,500 Marag MNT Training 4,500 National Federation of City Farms 19,000 National Playing Fields Association 75,600 Newham Community Renewal Programme Homeless Young People's Project 12,500 Northern Association for Community Care 42,400 Operation Drake Fellowship 18,750 Princedale Trust for Release 60,000 Retired Executives Action Clearing House 6,750 Scoutreach 750 Standing Conference of Women's Organizations 1929 Stockport Job Shop 350 Student Community Action Development Unit 16,624 Task Force 84,200 Time for God 3,800 Trinity Overnight Shelter Birmingham 15,000 Volunteer Center 514,000 West End Coordinated Voluntary Services 105,450 West Yorkshire Radio Action 30,250 Young Volunteers Resource Unit 101,000 Final Report page 27 The following grants were paid under the Development of Local Voluntary Action and Small Grant Scheme Organisation 1981 £282 DLVN E. Training Group for Community Work 7,472 Newham Parents Community Resource Programme 10,850 Salford Community Involvement Project 7,275 Social Care Assembly for Normanton 4,864 Training for Voluntary Organisation Southampton 2,950 Waveney Project Suffolk 3,569 Wiltshire Information Resource Exchange 500 Small Grant Scheme Cornwall, Carrick and Kerrier 10,000 Sandwell Metropolitan Borough 14,250 Wrekin District including Telford 10,000 2,689,901 In addition, the following grants in aid are administered by the Visa Women's Royal Voluntary Service 3,778,000 National Council for Voluntary Organisations 742,000 Final Report page 28 The voluntary bodies receiving grant aid in the 1982-83 financial year and the amount of grant paid or to be paid, where this has been fully determined, are as follows. Organisation 1982 to £83 grants administered by the Visa Action Resource Centre 20,000 Association of Researchers in Voluntary Action and Community Involvement 7,400 AVEC 13,000 Bristol Courts Family Conciliation Service 23,000 British Association for Counselling 8,750 British Association of Settlements and Social Action Centres 25,500 British Council of Churches Community Work Resource Unit 12,880 SETU 29,500 Charity Trading Advisory Group 8,500 Church Army Inner Cities Unit 11,250 Community Projects Foundation 764,000 Community Service Volunteers 529,500 Community Transport 34,000 Fair Play for Children 25,000 Federation of Community Work Training Groups 20,000 Festival Welfare Services 18,500 Gamblers Anonymous General Services Board 1,000 Horticultural Therapy Land Use Volunteers 4,000 International Voluntary Service 18,000 London Voluntary Service Council 1798 Merseyside Council for Voluntary Service 15,000 National Association of Young People's Counselling and Advisory Service 24,000 National Council for Voluntary Organisations Grant in Aid 724,000 National Council for Voluntary Organisations for International Conference on Social Welfare 9,700 National FDRT, N of City Farms 24,000 National Federation of Community Organisations 72,000 National Playing Fields Association 80,200 Northern Association for Community Care 39,600 Operation Drake Fellowship 25,000 Princedale Trust for Release 65,000 Retired Executives Action Clearing House 8,375 Standing Conference of Women's Organizations 3,000 Stockport Job Shop 52 Student Community Action Development Unit 21,500 Task Force 89,000 Trinity Overnight Shelter Birmingham 15,600 Time for God 9,000 Voluntary Action Lewisham 500 Volunteer Centre 558,000 West End Coordinated Voluntary Services 102,350 West Yorkshire Radio Action 18,150 Women's Royal Voluntary Service Grant in Aid 4,015,000 Young Volunteers Resource Unit 107,500 Final Report page 29 The Visa also makes grants under the Development of Local Voluntary Action Scheme Organisation 1982 to £83 Special Programme Hull Community Resources Development Project 14,750 NE Training Group for Community Work 25,000 Newham Parents Community Resource Programme 17,500 Salford Community Involvement Project 18,500 Social Care Assembly for Normanton, West Yorkshire. 12,300 Training for Voluntary Organisation, Southampton. 12,600 Waveney Project, Suffolk. 13,800 Wiltshire Information Resource Exchange. 15,500 Small Grants Scheme Provisional Allocation, Cornwall, Carrick and Kerrier. 20,000 County Durham, Easington and Wear Valley. 20,000 Sandwell Metropolitan Borough. 20,000 Wrekin District. 20,000 Scotland and Wales. 40,000 Charity Reviews. Amount of grant not yet determined, Norfolk, Lancashire. Grants for refugees. Amount of grant already determined, British Refugee Council Vietnamese Refugee Programme. 390,140 British Refugee Council. Refugees from other parts of the world. 282,860 Ockendon Venture Vietnamese Refugee Programme. 225,000 Refugee Action Vietnamese Refugee Programme. 219,300 Save the Children Fund Unaccompanied Vietnamese Minors Home. 30,000 Amount of grant not yet determined, Ockendon Venture Unaccompanied Vietnamese Minors Home. Grants or grants in aid to other bodies. International Social Service of Great Britain. 181,000 Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents. 9,000 United Kingdom Immigrants Advisory Service. Grant in aid 721,000 Grants administered by Criminal Department. Amount of grant already determined, Anchor Club Leicester. 7,550 Apex Trust. 48,250 Barnsley Crow. 6,165 Bristol Prisoners Visitors Centre. 1,400 Birmingham Prisoners Visitors Centre. 3,376 Brixton Prisoners Visitors Centre. 3,000 Bulldog Manpower Services Ltd. 392,000 Catholic Marriage Advisory Council. Grant in aid 98,750 Circle Trust. 32,700 Dartmoor Accommodation Scheme. 4,890 Family Welfare Association. Grant in aid 15,200 Hackrow Crisis and Support Centre. 4,675 Halifax Crow. 7,278 Hampshire Care Trust. 750 Hull Prison Visitors Centre. 1075 Institute of Marital Studies. Grant in aid 238,700 Jewish Marriage Education Council. Grant in aid 5,000 Leeds Prisoners Visitors Centre. 1,100 Lewis Prison Visitors Centre. 100 Lifeline Day Centre. 8,086 Final Report, page 30. The Visa also makes grants under the Development of Local Voluntary Action Scheme Organisation. 1982 to £83 National Association for the Care and Rehabilitation of Offenders. Grant in aid 462,000 NACRO Education Advisory Service. 22,330 National Association of Voluntary Hostels Ltd. 33,760 National Marriage Guidance Council. Grant in aid 750,000 New Bridge. 10,708 North East London St. Leonard's Society. 1372 North Eastern Prison Aftercare Society. 900 Preston and District Lodging Scheme. 2,000 Prisoners' Wives and Families Society. 1850 Prisoners' Wives Service. 4,850 St. Giles Day Centre. 4,000 Society of Voluntary Associates. Sover. 21,495 Stoneham Housing Association Ltd. 29,000 South Yorkshire Dacrow. 6,500 York Crow. 6,926 Amount of grant not determined in respect of specific recipients. £2. 894 million is allocated to the deficit funding of some 300 hostels or other similar accommodation schemes administered by more than 200 voluntary bodies. A further £538,000 is allocated mainly on a once-for-all basis to assist special projects to be set up or maintained by some 60 voluntary organisations. Final report, page 31. Grants administered by the Voluntary Services Unit Organisation. 1983 to £84 Action Resource Centre. 27,000 Association of Researchers in Voluntary Action and Community Involvement. 10,000 Birmingham Settlement. 21,500 Bristol Courts Family Conciliation Service. 25,000 British Association for Counselling. 6,250 British Association of Settlements and Social Action Centres. 25,500 British Council of Churches Community Work Resource Unit. 14,250 Community Development Exchange UK Symposium. 7,500 Community Education Training Unit. 32,945 Church Army Inner Cities Unit. 15. 0 Community Projects Foundation. 811,250 Community Service Volunteers. 502,000 Community Service Volunteers. Grant for Young Offenders by Prison Department. 76,960 Community Transport. 36,000 Councils for Voluntary Service National Association 7,000 Drake Fellowship 15,000 Fair Play for Children 25,900 Federation of Community Work Training Group 21,000 Festival Welfare Services 20,000 Gamblers Anonymous General Services Board 1,000 Hammersmith and Fulham Race Relations Project 3,675 Horticultural Therapy Land Use Volunteers 4,800 International Voluntary Service 19,000 Leicestershire Race Awareness Consortium 1,000 Merseyside Council for Voluntary Service 15,000 Midlands Group of Volunteer Organisers 13,500 National Association of Young People's Counselling and Advisory Services 25,200 National Council for Voluntary Organisations Grant in Aid 797,000 National Federation of City Farms 25,000 National Federation of Community Organisations 86,000 National Playing Fields Association 84,500 Northern Association for Community Care Bendrigg Lodge 41,500 Pensioners Link Association Previously Task Force 93,000 Princedale Trust for Release 68,000 Retired Executives Action Clearing House 15,085 Sefton Community Resource Action Project 1,000 Standing Conference of Women's Organisations 3,500 Stonebridge Holliston Bus Garage Project 10,000 Student Community Action Development Unit 23,000 Time for God 9,500 Trinity Overnight Shelter Birmingham 1360 Turning Point Lewisham 4,700 United Funds Hampshire Development Project 4,750 Volunteerope 2,500 Volunteer Centre 600 2,000 Warrington Workshop for Voluntary Action 9,900 West End Coordinated Voluntary Services 107,550 Women's Royal Voluntary Service Grant in Aid 4,185,000 Young Volunteer Resource Unit 112,500 Grants for the Development of Local Voluntary Action Scheme Special Program Final Report Page 32 Grants administered by the Voluntary Services Unit Organisation 1983-84 Hull Community Resources Development Project 18,320 NE Training for Community Work 25,000 Newham Parents Community Resource Program 18,250 Salford Community Involvement Project 19,200 Social Care Assembly for Normanton, West Yorkshire 12,825 Training for Voluntary Organisations Southampton 13,000 Waveney Project Suffolk 14,400 Wiltshire Information Resource Exchange 31,036 Small Grant Scheme Cornwall 10,000 County Durham 10,730 Sandwell Met Borough 16,200 Wrekin District 10,000 Scotland and Wales 40,000 Charity Reviews Lancashire 15,200 Norfolk 300 Voluntary Services Unit Grants for Refugees British Refugee Council Vietnamese Refugee Programme 232,398 Refugees from other parts of world 355,812 Ockendon Venture 237,091 Refugee Action 211,498 Grants or Grants in Aid to Other Bodies International Social Service of Great Britain 163,033 Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents 10,000 United Kingdom Immigrants Advisory Service 778,000 Grants administered by Criminal Department Anchor Club Leicester 8,760 Apex Trust 1627 Birmingham Committee for Night Shelter 16,700 Birmingham Prisoners Visitors Centre 3,560 Bristol Prisoners Visitors Centre 1,500 Brixton Prisoners Visitors Centre 4,000 Bulldog Manpower Services Ltd 347,000 Burnbake Trust 11,800 Catholic Marriage Advisory Council Grant in Aid 103,700 Circle Trust 35,000 City Roads Crisis Intervention, Ltd 19,000 Dartmoor Accommodation Scheme 6,055 Family Welfare Association Grant in Aid 15,950 Hackrow Crisis and Support Centre 4,954 Hampshire Care Trust 750 Hull Prison Visitors Centre 870 Institute of Marital Studies Grant in Aid 253,350 Jewish Marriage Education Council Grant in Aid 5,000 Leeds Detoxification Centre 20,199 Leeds Prisoners Visitors Centre 1,200 Lewis Prisoners Visitors Centre 110 Lifeline Day Centre 8,652 National Association for the Care and Resettlement of Offenders Grant in Aid 531,000 NACRA Education Advisory Service 23,894 Final Report page 33 Grants administered by the Voluntary Services Unit Organisation 1983 to £84 National Association of Voluntary Hostels Ltd. 36,123 National Association of Victims Support Scheme 39,500 National Marriage Guidance Council Grant, in aid 788,000 New Bridge 12,000 North East London St. Leonard's Society 1468 Northeastern Prison Aftercare Society 800 Preston and District Lodging Scheme 2,200 Prisoners' Wives and Families Society 3,700 Prisoners' Wives Services 6,700 St. Giles Day Centre 4,300 Society of Voluntary Associates over 30,993 South Yorkshire DACRO 6,955 York Crow 8,511 Additionally, an amount of grant is allocated each year to the deficit funding of more than 300 hostels and similar accommodation schemes administered by some 200 voluntary organisations, providing places for ex-offenders. In 1983-84 such grants amounted to £528 million. A further allocation is made in respect of once for all grants to voluntary organisations providing day facilities and other services for ex-offenders. These grants amounted to £501,356 in 1983-84.